Someone can love you deeply and still stay away from you because love does not always make people brave. Sometimes it exposes how afraid they are. In this speech, you will understand why their silence may not mean absence of feeling, but fear, conflict, guilt, or emotional overwhelm. Before you assume they forgot, you ask yourself this: why would someone who feels nothing still watch, remember, hesitate, and return in small invisible ways? If this message is already describing someone in your life, stay with this video because the next part will reveal why their distance may actually be their inner battle reaching its breaking point. Someone can stay away from you not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much. Your presence may touch something inside them that they do not know how to manage. When they are near you, they may feel exposed, restless, drawn in, and afraid at the same time. This is not simple attraction. This is the kind of emotional pull that shakes a person's inner structure. It makes them question their choices, their pride, their past, and even the mask they show to the world. And when a person is not emotionally prepared for that depth, their first instinct is often not to come closer. Their first instinct is to run. You may have noticed this pattern. One moment they seem warm, present, and deeply connected. Then suddenly they become distant, cold, or silent. This shift can confuse you because from your side, the connection felt real. But from their side, it may have felt real enough to scare them. They may not understand why your voice stays in their mind, why your absence feels heavy, why one small memory of you can disturb their whole day. So instead of admitting that you matter, they try to control the feeling by creating distance. This is where many people misunderstand love. They think deep love always creates immediate action. But sometimes deep love first creates fear, especially in someone who has spent years avoiding emotional honesty. Your energy may awaken a hunger in them, but also a fear of losing control. They may fear becoming dependent, being rejected, being changed, or being forced to face emotions they buried long ago. So their distance is not proof that you are unimportant. It may be proof that your presence reaches places in them they have never learned to handle. But here is the truth you must hold firmly. Their fear does not excuse their silence, and their inner conflict does not mean you should wait forever. Understand the reason, but do not abandon your self-respect. Love that cannot stand in the light will always hide in shadows until courage becomes stronger than fear. They may fear being seen too deeply by you because your presence does not allow them to remain completely hidden. Some people can handle attention, desire, and even affection, but they cannot handle being truly understood. There is a big difference. Attention touches the surface. Understanding touches the wound. When you look at them, speak to them, or simply exist around them, they may feel that you can sense what they are trying to hide: their insecurity, their longing, their guilt, their softness, their fear of not being enough. And for someone who has survived by wearing a mask, this kind of connection can feel almost threatening. They may be used to relationships where they can perform a role: the strong one, the unavailable one, the careless one, the one who does not need anyone. But with you, that performance begins to break. You may have seen their silence and still understood their pain. You may have noticed their behavior without needing explanations. You may have touched the part of them they thought nobody could reach. That is why they pull away. Not because you did something wrong, but because being near you makes it harder for them to lie to themselves. Deep connection exposes people. It brings the hidden self into the light. And not everyone is ready to stand there. Some people would rather disappear than admit they are vulnerable. They would rather act cold than confess they are affected. They would rather stay away than risk you seeing how much power your presence has over them. But do not romanticize their fear too much. This is important. Being afraid of being seen does not give someone the right to confuse you, punish you, or keep you waiting in emotional uncertainty. Their fear may explain their distance, but it does not make their distance fair. You can understand their wound without becoming responsible for healing it. Because real love is not only about being seen, it is about having the courage to stay when someone sees you clearly. Their silence may not actually be rejection. Sometimes silence is the only defense a person has when they do not know how to process what they feel. People often think rejection is loud and clear, but emotional conflict is usually quiet. It hides behind delayed messages, distant behavior, mixed signals, and unexplained withdrawal. A person who feels nothing usually moves on cleanly, but a person who is emotionally overwhelmed often becomes inconsistent. One day they move closer, the next day they disappear. Not because their feelings changed overnight, but because their fear became stronger than their courage. When someone carries unresolved pain, vulnerability can feel dangerous. Your connection may awaken emotions they buried years ago, feelings of abandonment, betrayal, shame, or loss of control. And instead of facing those emotions directly, they create distance. Silence becomes a shield. If they do not speak, they do not have to explain themselves. If they stay away, they do not have to risk rejection or emotional exposure. Distance gives them temporary control over emotions that feel too powerful inside them. This is why some people watch from afar instead of approaching directly. They may check your social media, ask about you indirectly, replay old conversations in their mind, or think about reaching out many times without actually doing it. Their inner world becomes full of tension. One part of them wants connection, another part wants safety. And when those two forces collide, silence is often what remains. But silence can also become a prison, because the longer someone avoids honest communication, the heavier the emotions become. What could have been a simple truth slowly turns into confusion, regret, and emotional exhaustion. Many people destroy meaningful connections not because love was absent, but because avoidance became stronger than emotional responsibility. Still, you must be careful not to confuse silence with depth automatically. Some people stay silent because they are wounded. Others stay silent because they are unwilling to grow. The result may feel the same to you, but the difference matters. A person who truly values the connection will eventually try to face their fear. A person who only hides behind silence will continue protecting themselves while expecting you to understand without effort. And love cannot survive long where honesty is constantly postponed. Some people love deeply but still lack the emotional maturity to handle love in a healthy way. This is one of the hardest truths to accept because we are taught to believe that strong feelings automatically create strong actions, but they do not. A person can miss you, think about you constantly, feel emotionally attached to you, and still fail to communicate clearly, show consistency, or give you emotional security. Feeling love and knowing how to carry love are two completely different things. Emotional maturity is not measured by intensity, it is measured by responsibility. It is the ability to face uncomfortable conversations instead of escaping them. It is the ability to express emotions honestly instead of hiding behind pride, confusion, or silence. Many people were never taught this. They grew up avoiding emotions, suppressing vulnerability, or associating love with pain and instability. So when they finally meet someone who genuinely matters to them, they become emotionally disorganized. Instead of moving closer with clarity, they move back and forth between desire and fear. You may notice that they give signs of deep feeling, then suddenly act distant. They may open up one day and completely shut down the next. They may say they care about you, but their actions leave you confused. This contradiction often comes from emotional immaturity. They feel the connection, but they do not yet have the internal stability to sustain it. Their emotions lead them, but they do not know how to lead themselves. This is why emotional maturity matters more than emotional intensity. Someone who feels deeply but avoids accountability can still hurt you repeatedly. They may expect you to understand their silence, excuse their inconsistency, or wait while they sort themselves out emotionally. But love without emotional discipline creates emotional chaos. No matter how real the feelings are, a connection cannot grow in a stable way if one person refuses to communicate, take responsibility, or face difficult truths. And this is where many people lose themselves. They keep focusing on what the other person feels instead of what the other person is capable of giving. But you must learn to separate the two. Someone can genuinely love you and still be emotionally unprepared for a healthy relationship. Their feelings may be real, but real feelings alone do not build trust, consistency, or emotional safety. Only maturity can do that. Sometimes your connection awakens parts of them they spent years trying to avoid. Not just love, but their shadow. The hidden side of the personality that carries unresolved fear, shame, insecurity, jealousy, regret, pride, and emotional wounds. Most people move through life without confronting these deeper parts of themselves. They stay distracted, emotionally guarded, and disconnected from their inner truth. But when a powerful connection enters their life, those hidden parts begin to rise to the surface. This is why some people become distant after feeling deeply connected to you. You are no longer just a person to them, you become a mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable when someone has spent years avoiding what they truly feel inside. Your presence may expose how lonely they really are beneath their confidence. It may expose how much pain they still carry from the past. It may reveal patterns of self-sabotage, emotional avoidance, or fear of intimacy that they can no longer ignore. A deep emotional bond has a strange effect on people. It does not only bring warmth, it also brings confrontation. Suddenly, they are forced to face the difference between who they pretend to be and who they really are. And many people are not prepared for that kind of inner conflict. Instead of moving through it consciously, they retreat. They distract themselves, become cold, overthink everything, or convince themselves that distance is safer than transformation. This is why they may seem internally divided around you. One part of them wants to move closer because your connection feels meaningful and alive, but another part resists because closeness means change, and change threatens the identity they built to protect themselves. Your connection may require them to lower their defenses, admit mistakes, confront guilt, or become emotionally honest for the first time in years. That is not easy for someone who has built their entire emotional survival around avoidance. But you must understand something important. You are not responsible for fighting another person's shadow for them. Some people will recognize the truth your presence awakens and grow because of it. Others will run from it and call the connection too complicated simply because it demands emotional evolution. A meaningful connection can awaken a person, but awakening is painful when someone has spent their whole life asleep to themselves. Sometimes they stay away because coming closer would force them to make a decision they are not emotionally ready to make. Distance allows them to remain in a space of possibility where they can still feel connected to you without fully confronting what that connection demands from them. But closeness changes everything. Closeness requires honesty. It requires action. It forces a person to stop hiding behind confusion and finally choose whether they are willing to risk vulnerability, change, and emotional responsibility. As long as they remain distant, they can avoid difficult truths. They do not have to explain why they disappeared. They do not have to admit how deeply they feel. They do not have to confront the damage caused by their inconsistency. And most importantly, they do not have to face the possibility that loving you may require them to become a different version of themselves. This is why some people linger at the edge of connection. They want the emotional comfort of your presence, but they fear the transformation that real intimacy demands. A real connection always asks something from a person. It asks them to release pride, to become emotionally transparent, to stop running from themselves, to let go of old patterns that once protected them. And many people resist this because transformation feels like a kind of death to the ego. The identity they built around emotional distance, control, or avoidance begins to crack when genuine love enters their life. Suddenly, they can no longer pretend they do not care. They can no longer distract themselves from what they truly feel. And that realization creates pressure inside them. This is why they may seem trapped between moving toward you and pulling away from you. One side of them knows the connection is real, the other side fears what they will lose if they fully surrender to it. Sometimes it is pride, sometimes it is control, sometimes it is the comfortable version of themselves they created long ago. Because once a person admits that someone truly matters, they can no longer hide behind emotional detachment. But do not mistake hesitation for destiny. A person who truly values the connection will eventually understand that avoiding a decision is still a decision. Silence is a decision, distance is a decision, delaying truth is a decision, and at some point, every emotionally divided person reaches a moment where they must either step forward honestly or lose the connection they were too afraid to hold properly. Your absence may be teaching them what your presence truly meant. While you were there, your love may have felt natural to them. Your attention, your understanding, your emotional availability may have become something they quietly depended on without fully appreciating. This happens often in deep connections. People become so used to a soul being present that they stop realizing the emotional impact that soul has on their life. But when distance enters, reality becomes louder than comfort ever was. Silence has a strange power. It removes distraction. It forces people to sit with their own thoughts. And when someone who deeply affected them is suddenly no longer emotionally available in the same way, the mind begins to replay everything it once overlooked. Small conversations return, the feeling of your energy returns. The emotional safety they felt around you becomes clearer in your absence than it ever was in your presence. This is why some people begin to feel your value only after losing direct access to you. Your absence creates contrast, and contrast reveals truth. Suddenly they notice how empty certain interactions feel without you. They notice how rare it was to feel understood the way you understood them. They may try to distract themselves, meet other people, stay busy, or act unaffected, but emotional memory does not disappear easily when a connection was real. In fact, distance often intensifies what the heart was trying to suppress. And here is what many people never admit openly. The person who walked away is not always free from emotional suffering. Sometimes they carry your absence quietly. They think about reaching out, but hesitate. They wonder if you moved on. They question whether they made the wrong choice. Pride may stop them from speaking, but internally they are forced to confront the emotional space you once filled in their life. But your task is not to sit and wait for someone to realize your worth. That is where people lose themselves. The deeper lesson is not about making someone miss you. It is about understanding your own value enough to stop chasing those who only understand it after distance appears. If your absence teaches them something meaningful, let that lesson belong to their growth. Your responsibility is to continue growing into a life where your worth is recognized without needing to be lost first. If this message feels personal to you, then listen carefully to this final truth. Sometimes the person who stays away is already fighting a battle inside themselves that is reaching its breaking point. People can suppress emotions for only so long before those emotions begin demanding to be faced. What they avoided in silence eventually grows heavier in silence. And when a connection is real, emotional distance does not erase it. It only delays the confrontation with it. Many people think avoiding feelings protects them. At first, it seems that way. They distract themselves, stay busy, act detached, or convince themselves they made the right choice by stepping away. But deep emotional connections leave psychological marks. Certain people change your inner world once they enter it, and after that, pretending becomes exhausting. The mind may try to move on quickly, but the deeper self continues holding the emotional truth underneath. This is why some people suddenly return after long periods of silence. Not because time magically created feelings, but because time removed their ability to keep running from those feelings. The emotional pressure slowly builds inside them. They begin comparing every interaction to the connection they lost. They begin noticing how rare emotional safety truly is. Regret starts replacing pride. Clarity starts replacing avoidance. And eventually they reach a moment where staying silent hurts more than risking vulnerability. But this does not mean every return should automatically be accepted. That is where wisdom matters. Some people return because they have genuinely changed. Others return because loneliness finally humbled them temporarily. You must learn to recognize the difference. A true return is not built only on words, emotions, or nostalgia. It is built on accountability, consistency, emotional honesty, and changed behavior. Without those things, the cycle simply repeats itself. And this is the deeper lesson hidden underneath all of this. Their journey is not the center of your life, your growth is. Whether they return or not, your purpose is to become emotionally stronger, clearer, and more grounded in your own worth. Because the moment you stop defining your value through another person's fear, silence, or confusion, you begin reclaiming your power. Sometimes the one who stayed away loved you deeply, but deep love without courage creates suffering. And eventually, every soul must choose between protecting its fear or finally surrendering to truth. In the end, someone can love you deeply and still stay away, because love alone does not make a person ready. Sometimes your presence awakens truth, fear, longing, guilt, and vulnerability all at once. They may run from you because being close to you forces them to face parts of themselves they have avoided for too long. But never confuse their inner battle with your responsibility. You can understand their silence, but you do not have to live inside it. You can respect their struggle, but you must also respect your own heart. If they return with honesty, accountability, and changed behavior, then the connection may have a chance to become something real. But if they only return with emotion and no growth, the same pain will repeat. So let this be your reminder. The person who truly loves you must eventually find the courage to stand in that love, not hide behind fear. And until they do, your duty is not to wait in emptiness. Your duty is to keep becoming whole, strong, peaceful, and deeply aware of your own worth.